So thanks for reminding me we stand between this audience and lunch, so we will get right to the point here. I think this morning certainly helped us see that hospitality, and not that we don't already know this certainly, but hospitality is certainly one of the most fertile industries in terms of innovation and startups. I think our pitches this morning were great examples of the level of innovation and creativity that's happening in our industry. So today I'm speaking with three leaders in the investment community, representing different stages of investment and very different perspectives and experience. So I'd like to just ask you all to please introduce yourselves and maybe share something personal about yourself, maybe what your best vacation has ever been.
Hello, got it. Hey everybody, my name is JP Bowgen. I'm with Camber Creek. Camber Creek is an early stage prop tech fund based out of New York and Washington, DC. We typically invest in companies in their earliest days, and we help those companies scale via a very large network of strategic limited partners, which has a big piece of it contributed to just the hospitality and hotel sector. I am responsible for leading our hospitality tech initiative. I also lead our European office. Very excited to be here and connect with everybody. And in terms of a fun fact, the most fun vacation I've ever taken, about 10 years ago, I was in Cairo, Egypt. The reason it was so fun was I had the opportunity to ride an Arabian horse around the pyramids at midnight.
Very cool.
I'm in tech, but I don't know how to switch on the mic, sorry. So, Kurien Jacob with HTV or Highgate Tech Ventures. We're focused on investing in predominantly hospitality tech, extending into restaurant and travel tech. We do invest in companies which sort of have a product market fit. We're opportunistic, we're not a fund, and we try to invest in companies where we can help them probably launch into the Highgate hotel side of it, but which is universally across the industry because we want them to do well across all hotels. And clearly hospitality is the biggest focus for us, including short-term rentals. My biggest vacations actually, I was born in Africa, so I went back to Africa and to the Serengeti, and just for 10 days, I think there's no place on earth. You see the circle of life. You see the wildebeest trying to cross the river and drowning, or vultures or hyenas and everything together. So that's the place where you can really switch off, and I think everybody needs it. So if you get a chance, definitely go to the Serengeti.
It's a metaphor for your business, no?
Yeah, totally. Circle of life. Everybody has to die one day, so including companies, sorry.
Hi guys, my name is Romil. I lead strategy and operations at Bridgeton. Bridgeton is a full-service real estate platform. We're based in Manhattan. We have about a pretty nice portfolio of boutique hotels, most notably the Walker Hotel in Tribeca and Walker Hotel Greenwich Village. We also have a portfolio of multifamily and office assets. I actually lead the incubation arm at Bridgeton, so we focus on launching new technologies in property tech, fintech, hotel tech, and also I help manage a portfolio of venture investments in those same industries. So a lot of the investments we make or companies we start really come from pain points we experience as a hotel operator or a borrower for a loan. Really comes from like the pain points and challenges we face.
Vacation?
Oh, and fun fact for vacation, last year I took my little brother to Iceland, and we did a road trip, and we lived out of our little camper van. So that was pretty cool.
Fantastic. Excellent. Thanks, guys. I always think it's helpful to get to know our panelists a little bit before they dive into exactly what it is they do. So why don't we start with that? How are you as investors evaluating the seemingly limitless number of opportunities to invest? What are you looking at or for, in addition to obviously the key core financial metrics? And KJ, we'll start with you.
Yeah, for us, this last 1.5 years has been absolutely insane with the amount of capital that's flown in, and people put a PowerPoint presentation and get $10 million and a $50 million valuation. So those days are hopefully gone. So there was just so many opportunities. But what we look at, metrics are very, very key. But one of the most important factors we look at is the founder and the teams, right? Because many of these businesses start off from one side, and some of them do pivot a little bit if they have to, and not stick to the core. You have to recognize the fact that any company can pivot, and is the team right there able to do that and not just give up. So you need the teams to be fully engaged. So we like companies where the founders and the teams are vested in to make it profitable, or not make it, to grow the business and not have a low stake is also an important criteria, because if they don't have enough in it for them to do well, then they could just walk away one day if it doesn't go well. So you have to be careful. And so the teams are a very, very critical part that we look at. And then obviously, if there's a concept and there's a potential product market fit wherein the product is there, so we don't just like to invest in somebody who say, hey, this is my product, and we haven't tried it. I mean, that's for Romil to do because he's early stage, so and he can afford to do it and test it out. And then we also like to test some of these concepts out across our hotel group, which is our sister side of the company, and see if there's a universal acceptance across the entire space. And we look at the TAM, the total addressable market. Is it really big enough where you just need a small percentage of it to make a big difference, versus a smaller addressable market where you might not have the potential to get somebody else to invest later on for the next stage. That's what we look at.
Romil, because you represent an early stage, is it different for you, or what are you looking at?
Yeah, so as a clarification, at Bridgeton, we're an early stage investor, and for us, that means companies that are pre-revenue or in the process of building product, or they have revenue of less than $1 million. So to add on to what KJ mentioned, team is super important as one of our criteriums. Within team, we look at what are the specific experiences, or what we call what's their intellectual property, what's their edge that they bring in, whether if that's partnerships or unique insight or technical skill set, if they're a coder or a programmer, and their ability to raise capital, not just from us, but in the future, and also their ability to build a world-class team. So can they attract talent? Can they attract people around them, good people around them? Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. So pivoting on that, similar question, but maybe JP, you can talk a little bit about the trends and opportunities that you see specifically in terms of hospitality innovation?
Yeah, sure. Great. So I think right now it's pretty interesting. The trends we're seeing, I'd really kind of characterize in two different buckets. You're seeing technologies that are very guest-centric, and then you're also seeing technologies that are very asset-centric. Right now, I think there's a lot of focus on, especially as we move past the pandemic, guest-centric technologies. How can hotels better engage their guests? And the technology trends that are most interesting are those that are kind of accelerating a trend to the omni-channel guest. And that, again, kind of comes in two flavors. The first is the immense use of data in hoteling today to understand who is your guest, how they're engaging with you, when they're spending time with you. And then on the flip side, there are a fair amount of technologies coming to market today that are helping hotels better engage those consumers on the front end. So smarter messaging apps, for example, that might translate into various languages, or apps that help you engage with the consumer on the messaging platform of their choice. I think right now the investment will continue to kind of focus on those guest-centric technologies. And then down the line, maybe in the midterm, we're going to start focusing on, I think, a little bit more around ESG initiatives in hoteling. As many of you probably know, hotels are responsible for about 1% of carbon emissions on the planet. And so there's a big opportunity to focus on how do we reduce that carbon footprint, whether that's via software or via carbon offsetting or carbon credit trading. I think is to be seen, but I think that's the next wave of technology that will come to market.
So JP, is that you're seeing on the asset side? I mean, ESG startups. Any other trends on the asset side that are interesting?
On the asset side, I think we're seeing a fair amount of kind of new age kind of hospitality living concepts. In terms of Camber Creek, we have a great partnership with a company called Placemaker that just rebranded from Y Hotel. there are a fair amount of companies coming to market that are creating these new age branded hospitality living concepts. And we'll get into it in a little bit, I think, but in terms of kind of what challenges that poses for the market, there are a lot of brands out there competing for consumer eyeballs, especially as companies like Placemaker and Sonder and Mint House continue to proliferate. But that is another piece of the market that we're focusing on.
Absolutely. Great. KJ, what about you?
Yeah. What we're seeing is, I mean, every month there are 47,000 new homes that are coming on to the market, which is higher than what restaurants were, 21,000 per month in 2021, 12,000 tech companies a month in 2021, and you see the short-term rental booming because you're creating entrepreneurs, so more and more small businesses or people getting into it. Yes, with increased mortgage rates, probably that's going to slow down. But to add to JP's, I think it's a fight for the customer for sure. It's like how do you control that? Who gets in front of that customer journey, right from the contactless or mobile check-in, and you can see a lot of people getting into that space, and the actual people who own that haven't done enough about like digitizing this whole journey from the customer, from the time they book to the time they actually check out. And we're seeing a lot of it also going into, I think contactless payments is going to be a massive touch point. Everybody thinks payments is just one last link in the whole process, but there's so much more. And if you can own that customer journey right through, then you can probably win in the payment space. And you'll see outside of hospitality, you can see the amount of money going to actually fintech. It's obviously got a beating in the last 6 months or a few weeks, but you can see that that's going to go more and more important. I mean, you can pay with your Apple wallet on the New York City Metro bus today, but how many hotels can you actually pay with Google Pay or the rest of it? It's insane. The bus, literally the Metro bus. So you're going to see some of that transformation happening because all payments, it's a massive industry, and I think that's the space we like to look at.
If I can just build on that, I think KJ's points are very astute. I'd be curious to connect with some folks in this room afterward as well. A lot of what we're also seeing in the background is this revitalizing of the hotel tech stack. In many regards, hotels are not equipped today to take on things like contactless payment or to engage with the guests because the technology is frankly ancient. So we've been looking at a fair amount of companies that might be providing new age PMSs or CRSs or infrastructure that can make hotels smarter. And be curious after this to hear some of the pain points that y'all might be facing in that regard. Something we're certainly focused on.
JP, I can tell you some of the pain points we're facing. So we have an e-commerce team at Bridgeton, and there's kind of 3 areas that they're focused on in terms of piloting new technology. One is upselling. So how can we upsell in a way that's genuine with the guest before they come onto the property and when they're on the property? Second is communication. So just having a SMS communication chain with the guest. So wherever they are on the property, they can text us and we can provide better service. Or if they want something delivered to them, we can provide that. So there are some providers there that we're experimenting with. And then the third opportunity is customer guest experiences. So we're in this amazing city of New York, in Williamsburg here, and so how can we bring the local venues home to a guest when they check in, and being able to do that digitally. And so there are a few vendors there that we're playing around with. But those are the kind of 3 areas that our e-commerce team is focused on the guest experience journey.
So Romil, sticking with you, watch outs, challenges?
Yeah, aside from, well, I shouldn't say that. Like, as a hotel operator, one of the biggest challenge today is labor. I think everyone in this room has experienced that pain point. And so how we're pivoting is seeing where we can, besides trying to recruit heavily and incentivize an awesome work culture, how can we use technology to alleviate the front desk agent? How can we empower them to do more with less and be tech enabled? And so that's kind of how we're addressing that challenge of labor.
How are you finding? So I can say on the not that I'm an operator, but from my hotel's perspective, one of the hardest lessons that, for good or bad, COVID kind of helped accelerate was the idea that technology is an empowering capability that enables you to do what you do best, which is serve your guests. Are you finding, because of the lessons of COVID, that these, rolling these things out or getting them into the hotels is a little bit easier than it used to be?
There has been a shift in mentality from, my colleagues. I think if you talk to them in 2018, 2019, it was, the mentality kind of was more of, how can we throw more labor at this issue? Yeah, exactly. Now it's like the opposite of, okay, how can we use technology for this issue? So, big kudos to everyone that's kind of made that mental pivot. And that's kind of what
I
we're
think,
doing.
Shannon, the part of it is because the hotel owners got used to having less staff, and they said never again are they going to allow staff to be added on. Yeah. But it also created a problem because the new people coming back on, with the revenues coming back on, they're not having enough time to focus on strategically what tech to use. So you get sort of lost and say, I'll do it later. So it's a good, it's sort of like the tail wagging the dog. It's there, but I think the openness at least is there, that after so many years, you had an event like this 100-year event to cause people to change their mindset, which is great.
Yeah. No, my personal perspective is I would never, ever want to go through that again, but there are so many silver linings that came out of the experience that, at least we can look back with not horror and terror entirely and feel like, hey, we as an industry have learned quite a bit, and I think we're better for it.
Hey, Shannon, one thing I think for the audience here, believe it or not, I feel Web 3.0 is something that you guys should study. It's going to happen at some point in time. I don't know when, but it's a trend, and it's something which is going to be transformational, especially if you're in the marketing side of the business. Just try to get into that space and adopt and learn. And that's actually got the most amount of funding, if you take out hospitality out of it, in the Valley and everywhere else. It's into Web 3.0 projects.
Excellent. I don't know, JP, did you have any other watch-outs or challenges that you guys are keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I think, so I alluded to it at the start of the conversation, but the way Camber Creek thinks about investing in technology is we lean into a big network of limited partners. They are frequently our inspiration for digging into certain theses that technology could potentially address or make better. And to play maybe the flip side of the coin, I think a watch-out just in general, maybe for founders or everybody in this room, is technology for technology's sake is not always the right answer. There is, as we've talked about, there will continue to be a competition for consumer eyeballs, but infusing technology into your experience simply because you think you need to have it, if it doesn't benefit the guest journey at all, I would seriously caution you against deploying that technology in your portfolios. So the way we think about it is, really spend some time with your own teams, your operations teams, your strategy teams, and think about what piece of our experience could do better, and how can a piece of technology help address that pain point, and work with folks like the two gentlemen and Shannon on this couch to help you find technologies that can address those issues.
I think that's a fantastic point because we all see outstanding pitches, great ideas, things that I'm sure we could find some use case for, but at the end of the day, if you don't actually have a use case for the technology, for the service, for the creation, innovation, it just creates a lot of noise, especially considering that a lot of our infrastructures are perhaps not the most modern and easily, the API connection isn't so easy, right? In fact, some of our systems, you can't even do a simple API integration. So I think that's a really great point, is think very carefully about the use case, the friction you're trying to remove, the experience you're trying to improve, because then you're going to choose a purpose-built solution for that problem and not just be attracted to the shiny object, which frankly is so easy to happen, right? So that's great. Thanks for that, JP. So gentlemen, and this is for all of you, what sectors should hospitality be looking at or learning from in terms of innovation? KJ, we'll start with you.
Was this part of the questions that we were supposed to prepare for?
I'm keeping you guys on your toes.
It's a tough one. So, am I looking blank? I would say I would use fintech. It looks like they're the perfect thing. They're doing everything right on tech, but if you see the disruption that's happening there and the clout of the big banks and everybody around it, but just see this movement that's happening to dislodge this archaic ways of financial systems, and they feel it. There's always control, but I think you see the biggest movement in fintech right to even the blockchain level. I think that is something which people have looked far ahead and not looked at short term. So I think I would take inspiration from that.
I think it's a really great point. I was reading an article, and I cannot remember the stat, but not only are there a tremendous amount of startups in this area, but the large, well-known, established financial services companies are investing a disproportionate amount of their R&D and their budgets in trying to avoid being disrupted in this area. So it's coming from all angles. So I think it's a really great point. And frankly, you want to talk about friction in an experience. I mean, it happens all the time. It happened to me on the New York City subway the other day, so I was a little frustrated by that. But Romil?
I say another industry is health tech. And so, I mean, COVID has accelerated a lot of digital therapeutics and just digital health startups out there. And the experience you get as a patient is something to kind of keep in the back of your mind as you're a hotel operator. How can I give this same level of service to my guests? And so experiences like Roman, Hims, Nurex, just being able to, like Lemonade Health. There are a lot of like great therapeutic companies out there and digital health companies out there that just have a great experience because they have to, because they're competing for patients. And yeah.
I know you asked for a sector, but I'm going to go with an asset type, if
Go
that's
for
okay. So we do a fair amount of work with multifamily LPs, and I think hotels and hoteliers benefit from a similar dynamic in that you have a number of units in your hotels. And the way that we encourage our partners to work with technology is to test. If you can break up your assets into subcomponents and say, we're going to try out a technology across only these 10 rooms and see how the experience, almost like an A/B test, see how the experience between consumers outside of this subset looks, feels, works compared to the 10 rooms that we're implementing this new technology on. That is a model that I think is really effective. We encourage that breaking down into testing within our entire network, and it's a really great way to understand which technologies are working and which technologies are not. We find that our operating or our multifamily operators and owners tend to do quite a good job at that. It could be a good kind of lens to look at hotels through as well.
Excellent.
I was just going to add, our property managers that manage our office assets take a lot of inspiration from our hotel team. Right now, office assets aren't doing so well because of the shift to working remotely or a hybrid model. And so we're constantly figuring out ways, how can we provide a premium experience to our landlords and their tenants so there's a feeling of community and tech enablement that they've never had before. So we take inspiration actually from our hotel team.
Yeah, so maybe the question is, what industry should be looking at us for innovation? I love that.
That's right.
Very good. Great. So gentlemen, knowing we have some founders in the audience and entrepreneurs who are starting new companies, question for you all. If you could give one word of advice for aspiring entrepreneurs who may be listening today, what would it be? And that word can certainly be hyphenated.
Yeah, I'll start because that was my question. If hyphenated answers are, they work. I would say recession-proof. It's not a fairly great topic to talk about, but as a founder coming into this new, physical environment, thinking about how your business that you're building can survive just different this hard time that potentially may be coming up. And so if you're a consumer tech company or a consumer goods company, thinking about your spend and your marketing and just really thinking about the value add you provide to your customers and how that value add can kind of survive during different types of periods. And if you're a first-time hotelier and you're not in tech, same thing. How can you give an awesome guest experience at the best unit economics possible? Yeah.
Single word, fun. So I think that's what we've seen is the companies in our portfolio that do the best are the ones that are having fun doing it, because they're not in a corporate environment. People chuck their corporate jobs, get into the startup mode. And I think having fun while you do it is very critical. You cannot think of this as a job or something you need to do. You have to have fun while doing it. And we use the same mentality in our investment theses. Is we only invest in companies where we can have fun doing it too, because it could be the best idea, and if we don't get a good feeling about the whole founders and teams, and we're not going to have fun while doing it, then it's not what we really look at. So I think the term that comes to me is fun. It took a while, Shannon. So
No, that's great. I think it's a great point. Great point, JP.
I would probably say patience. Right now, KJ alluded to it at the start of the conversation, but the days of ridiculous growth and high multiples are potentially very long gone. And the way we're thinking about coaching our portfolio companies is, if you need to tamp down your burn a little bit, not for a 2x year-over-year growth instead of a 3x year-over-year growth, but give yourself until middle of 2024 in terms of runway, you should do it. That is I think that patience of deploying capital is going to be really important in the next 12 to 18 months, especially for those founders that want to go out and raise an outsized round of capital at some point. So I would really encourage that serious conscientiousness on how you're burning your capital. To Romil's point, how you're allocating that capital across your business, and really just stay patient for the next 12 to 18 months as we ride this thing out.
Fantastic, gentlemen. And I'm going to leverage a message from Jeff David earlier today, wherever he is. Be a pig. Be a pig. Be all in, right? I think that's it's similar to the fun message, but it's for many of you, it's what you're spending your days, nights, weekends, holidays, early mornings, late nights doing. So you better be having fun, and clearly you got to be all in. So fantastic. Well, this is an outstanding opportunity for any of you in the audience. I am going to open it up for any questions that you may have for these three gentlemen who obviously bring a wealth of experience, knowledge, and investment. So if you have any questions, I'd love to open it up.
So my question is, I've been in hotel tech for 25 years, and from the very beginning, one of the major pain points was all the disparate systems within a single hotel. And with all these startups, and you were talking about new CRS, new PMS, which is super exciting because a lot of them are so legacy and old platform and all. Do you see any innovators who are really solving more than one problem, or is everybody still taking a piece of it and using APIs to connect?
That's one of the biggest areas we see is if you look at hospitality tech, there's no real consolidation or single player. It's probably 10 players which are probably doing 100 or 150 million dollars in revenue, and that can make a difference. And a lot of that is going to happen through M&A. But the way we look at it is because of this, it's the opportunity too. Because if everything was already there, then you wouldn't have the money flow coming in to solve these problems. So it's going to transform. What we feel is going to transform rapidly with M&A, more so even now. You'll get a lot of the other companies which are many companies trying to solve the same problem. You're going to probably see some M&A to get greater in size and try to solve a larger stack of problem than individual ones. And I can see what you're saying. Each one try to solve a small problem, but they start with that wedge and then they try to go into a bigger solution.
Yeah, and to build on that point, and I completely second it, I think one of the elements of businesses that we look at that's really important is how integratable are they with existing systems. We were investors in a company called Latch that we just exited not too long ago. But it's an interesting example of almost the Apple versus Android comparison. Apple builds a closed ecosystem. Latch very much so did the same thing. And thankfully, they've done quite well. But in hotels, I think the narrative is a little bit different. There's always going to be a system or a software that a hotelier does not want to move away from. And I would be wary of companies that say, oh, we are the one-stop shop for everything you need. Rather, I think integration as a piece of the business is hyper critical. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about engaging with new technologies as they come to market.
Thank you. How do you think about businesses that fall in an uncanny valley between traditional real estate that moves pretty slow and is conservative, and venture that expects exponential growth? I think there is something in the middle, right? Something experimental model, but might not grow exponentially. How do you think about these types of companies? Do you come across them? How do you think about investing in them, or the types of capital that could support these innovations?
Yeah, great question. There's like the spectrum of this is a pure venture-backed business, mainly driven by tech. And on the other end, you have businesses that are asset-heavy, not great for venture-backed investors, and then everything in the middle. And so for us at Bridgeton, as a venture investor, we actually we try to differentiate between the middle and venture and stick with venture. That's because that's our thesis and mandate. But as an investment platform separate from venture, we also do look at the tech-enabled assets that have an opportunity to scale better than just traditional assets. So it really depends on if you're looking to raise money, really understanding which investors cater towards your business and what's your story. I feel like a lot of times if you're in that middle area, your story and how you tell your story to a venture investor will be different than to, let's say, a private equity investor, a lower market private equity investor.
Don't look at them, they're not adding. Anyone else? Yes. Wow, you guys are going to get between lunch and others, huh?
Thank you.
That's the last question. What time is lunch?
So from an in-room guest experience standpoint, what would you say are the things that guests are looking for from a technology standpoint?
Yeah, I'm just speaking from experience because I have these conversations every day. One thing we're hearing is guests want to have easy access to the front desk via text communication. It's kind of crazy how we don't have an ability for guests to text the front desk or have a text-enabled experience if they're at a bar and they want to be able to, at one of our F&B portions of the hotel, be able to get access to a drink or snacks. So text-enabled communication is probably one of the top guest requests that we're getting.
Yeah, and we're seeing a fair amount of technologies that contribute to this concept of low touch, no touch. So whether that's access control locks that the guest can just tap a card and walk right into their room, or to Romil's point, texting, just basic texting with the concierge on site or kind of the management of the asset. Anything that's allowing the consumer to check in seamlessly, get to their room, check out seamlessly, and go to the next stop is I think going to continue to be a pretty big demand.
And they don't have to build it on their own because there's a company called Twilio, which is phenomenal in its text capabilities. They don't have to reinvent it. So now you can actually get onto certain platforms and build over the generic platforms across industries. And so if you get on Twilio, you can actually companies will actually build on top of that for the text messaging and guest communications.
Hi, thank you. So I understand you're all operators. True?
No, we didn't do a good intro. At least I didn't, probably.
Okay.
Okay. We have an operating side of the business, but we run tech ventures, which we use them as a test bed, and we can almost get concepts live and diligence live if we have to. So.
I was going to say Bridgeton's the same way.
Yeah, but you're related. So from a customer acquisition standpoint, where do your operator partners model consideration? Where do they think consideration is happening, where the consumer is actually making choice for the purposes of customer acquisition?
Sorry, could you say that one more time? Just want to make sure I understand the question.
Okay, so you have Porter and Tribeca.
Yep.
And they're trying to find me.
Yep.
and was in Manhattan last night. I'm trying to find a place to go. So how do you meet your customers from a customer acquisition standpoint? How do you find me in my consideration process?
Yeah, great question. We're still trying to figure that out ourselves. One thing we're doing is, besides the OTAs, we're trying to build traffic to our website. Right now, we're doing a lot of email marketing and geo-fenced social media. But that's kind of the best way for now of how we're attacking that.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a great answer necessarily, but we've talked about kind of winning over the consumer, and I think the strongest source of building affinity is from a consumer's peer. So if you can get peer-to-peer recommendation off the ground, that is a very, very powerful way of getting into that consideration set. Is there a technology out there doing that particularly well? I don't know necessarily. I would have to keep my eye on it, but that's what I would say.
I mean, this is a perennial problem with all hotels for sure. They've been trying to solve it forever, and if it had been solved, then you wouldn't have had these market caps for Booking and Expedia and the rest of the world. But I think the key is you have to be present on these channels, and you as a customer might be on those channels. But it's again a question of measuring ROI. Is it going to be through social? Is it going to be, again, multi-channel? You could go on social stuff, go to Google, go to something else, and come back. And as long as you're getting positive ROI, then you should continue to spend on those, on attracting that right customer. And I think your own customers might be another way of telling guests about, hey, listen, I've stayed here. I think that's probably the biggest thing ever. Telling customers about what experiences you have had, I think, is one of the biggest ways to do it.
I'll just add to that. So new customer acquisition is costly. There's a high CAC. But what we're trying to do is all the customers guests that do come to us, how do we retain them so they come back to the Walker hotels after their stay one time? And so there are solutions, technology solutions we're piloting that have it's just more genuine email marketing post-stay. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. It's such
Thanks,
a
Shannon.
pleasure.
Thank you, Shannon.